Hello everyone. Today I want to go over connectors, tables, queries and variables. Introduction to variables. Okay. Power Apps and Excel both automatically recalculate formulas as the input data changes. So you don't need to create and update variables. So what this is saying is, just like how you would use formulas in Excel, if one of the cell changes, the formula automatically recalculates to display the value in another cell. And if I open Excel quickly, I'm just going to go to Excel. So I just created a formula which basically adds A2 and B2. If I change the value of B2, it automatically recalculates. Power Apps also works in a similar principle like this. By taking this approach whenever possible, you can more easily create, understand, and maintain your app. So what this is saying is basically it's easy. You don't have to, like, every time something changes, you don't have to store that value in a variable and then like make that. You don't have to write another code or anything to update the value in another object. It automatically does everything. You will need to use variables in Power Apps. Okay, the only sometimes you will have to use variables. I'm going to quickly go through that right now. You will need to use variables in Power App, which extends Excel's model by adding behavior formulas. These formulas run when, for example, a user selects a button. Within a behavior formula, it's often helpful to set a variable to be used in other formulas. So, what this is saying is basically you could write a formula which would trigger when something happens, like uh, some behavior is triggered. For example, when somebody clicks a button or when somebody navigates to another screen, then a formula can be triggered. Okay, so which can then store the output of that formula into a variable, and that variable can be used in multiple locations in the app. I'm going to quickly show you that as an example. So I have created an application right now. If I go to Trivi, I just created an empty button, and let me delete these things. Okay, and I'm just going to add two items here. So I'm just going to add a text. Okay, let's wait for, okay, I added a text, and let's add a date picker also. Okay, so what I'm doing is we have a date picker, and the default date is at you'll be able to see all the parameters of this particular object here. Okay, and you can also select the object, and you have this button called properties, where you'll be able to see all the properties here also. I'm just going to leave it as it is because I'm not really going to change the date picker, but I want to change this text. So what I can do is I can like, if I want to display something like the date you have selected is, and let me go back to preview. The name of the date picker is date picker 2. So date picker 2 dot selected date. Okay, so if I expand this further, the date you have selected is October 1st, 2025. So what we have done is I have not saved the output of this date picker in a variable at all. It is directly able to get the data by accessing the property called selected date. So if I'm just going to click play right now, and if, for example, I change the date to 15th of October and I click OK, the date you selected is October 15th. So it is sort of like Excel, like just like how in an Excel spreadsheet, if I change the value of the input here to 10, the formula which depends on this particular cell automatically gets changed, right? Similar way is being used in Power Apps. The Power Apps works sort of like Excel. So if you're familiar with Excel, it would be an easy transition to Power Apps formulas. Okay. So the thing to note is every single object that you have, including your screen, including your entire application itself, all of these have some properties, right? So, for example, the entire application has a property called onStart, which you can write a formula that triggers every time the application is started. Or you can, like, the screen itself has some properties called height, width, and everything. And just like how the application and the screen has properties, each of the objects in a screen has multiple properties. Like, you can select the color, so many properties are there, and those properties could be accessed from another object, just like how you would access the value of a cell in Excel from another cell. Okay, that's what I wanted to say here. So, right now, I want to show you how you can use variables to achieve the same thing. So I'm just going to create a button also. I can go to button, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a function. I will go more about these functions later. Set. I'm just going to call this variable selected date. Okay, value would be um, date picker 2, date picker 2 dot selected date. Okay, and I close this button. So, and I'm just going to quickly replicate this text, this label, and instead of directly selecting the selected date, I'm just going to use the variable that we have created called selected date. Okay. So if I press play and I select the date as October 1st and I click OK, and when I click this button, only when I click this button that variable is updated. And you see, if I change it again, it's not getting changed because the variable hasn't changed, but the text box, since this text box is referring to this date picker, that's why this text box has changed. Yeah, text label has changed, but only if I click the button, the variable is updated, and that would appear in this label. So, when it comes to variables, there are three types of variables that are used in Power Apps. One is global variables. Scope is like the entire application. It's simplest to use, holds a number, text, boolean, record, table. It can literally be anything in the application that can be referenced from anywhere in the app. And there is also another thing called context variable with the scope of only that one particular screen. Great for passing value to a screen, much like parameters to a procedure in other languages. Can be referenced from only one screen. Okay, and the function that is used to start the global variable is set. The function that is used to set the value for a context variable is update context or navigate. There's also another type of variable called collection, and the scope of that is the entire application. It holds a table that can be referenced from anywhere in the app, allows the contents of the table to be modified rather than being set as a whole, can be saved to the local device for later use. I will go to this local device part later, but like one thing to note is we will be using the collect and clear collect function. So, normally when you are trying to store a variable that needs to be accessible throughout the application or not just a screen, you will have to use global variable. If you want to just use it in one screen, you can use context variable. Okay, and collection is used to store a table. See, the thing is, global variable can also store a table, but collection can only store table. It cannot store any other type of uh, any other data type. So I'm just going to quickly show you an example of, first I'll go with global variable first. And the function that is used to set a global variable, I've already shown you the set function already, but I'm just going to quickly repeat it. Okay. Go into Power Apps right now and just going to add a button. adding a button here, and I'm just going to call the text of the button as add global var. Okay, so this adds a global variable, and the function that is used to add a global variable is set. Okay, global variable one, and the value I'm going to use is one, right? And if you want to set multiple global variable, you can do it in one go as well. I can put the semicolon. I'm just going to set another variable as well. Set global var2, and I'm just going to set it as test. Okay, and I'm just going to click close. And when I go to this tab called variable and I hover over global variable, I see there is global variable 1 and there is global variable 2. Although the value is not stored, every time you use the set function and you declare a global variable, Power Apps knows to allocate some memory for this particular variable, although that value for that variable is not set yet. But if I click play and I click this button, the values for that global variable is set. Okay, so you are able to see that global var1 has number 1 and global var2 has the text test. Okay, and I've already shown that you can create a text box and access this variable. I'm just quickly I'm quickly going to show that to you again. So if I select text label, global var1 and global var2, and to separate it, I'm just going to quickly put uh, a a space as well. So we have created a global variable and we have stored a value to that global variable. Now, going back to my PowerPoint, there is also context variable. The thing about global variable, as I said, it can be accessed anywhere in the application. So I'm able to let me go back to my trivia. I'm going to create a new screen, and I'm just going to add that label again. Uh, where is okay? Text label is here, and the text that we want to have is global variable one and space and global variable 2. Okay, so we are able to access it from multiple screens, but context variable, as I've told you, can only be accessible in one screen. So I'm just going to create another button which would create a local variable. I'm just dragging and dropping a button, and on select you have to use update context. Update context. You can also use navigate. Navigate is a function which takes you from one screen to another, and when you're able to go from one screen to another, you can update local variables there also. But I'll go to update context first. Update context requires you to put all the variables in a flower bracket. You have to open and close a flower bracket, and I'm just going to put loc var1, and you put a colon. I'm just going to put 10, and I'm going to add another local variable as well. You can just put a comma here, local var2 colon test2. Okay, so what this would do is it would create two local variable, local var1, local var2, and it would update these two values accordingly. I'm just going to quickly create a button as well, just like what we did last time. Might as well go to tree view and just go and copy paste from the other screen. Just copy this, go back to screen. Don't need this. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly delete this. Okay, and instead of global variable and local var1, local var2. Okay, right now there is no value. When I click play, and when I click on this button, so the values for the local variable is updated in this a text label. And if I go to another screen and I try to, I'm just going to quickly copy paste this label. Just going to copy this, and when I put this in screen 5, it will give you an error because get help on this error. If you see this, the name isn't valid. If you see the issue here, local var1 isn't recognized. Obviously, as I said, local variable can only be used in one screen. I want to go through collections right now. As I have told you, collections is used to store a table, and there are two functions that can be used to establish a collection: clear and clear collect. So that I'll show you the differences between these two functions right now. I can go to. I'm just going to create another screen. New screen. Okay. I'm going to create a button like what we did last time. Okay, and I'm just going to put collect, and I'm just going to call the collection as test collect one. Okay, and the value that I'm going to put is call 1 10, call 2 test. Okay, and I can add another item as well because it's a table. I can just quickly copy paste this, and so you have to define the column name and the value. And instead of 10, I'm going to put 15. I'm going to put test2 for the second row, and I'm going to close this. So what this is going to do is it is going to create a collection called test collect one. I'm going to rename this button. I'm going to rename this as collect. So since we have created a button which creates a collection, when I click on this button, I can go to this tab called variables, and I see there is a collection called test collect with 2 rows in it. We are able to display this collection by creating a table. I can go to insert, and I can search for table. I'm going to drag and drop this data table here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click data source, and that will allow me to select the items property of this table, and I'm going to type in test collect one. Okay, and once we do that, it is going to use this collection as the input for this table. And now we need to select the fields that we want to display, and I can quickly click add fields, and I'm selecting column 1 and 2. Okay, see there are 2 rows that are created, and if I click on this button again, the same thing gets added twice, because what collect does, it not only creates the table, it basically appends the values that are given here. it, so if this collection doesn't exist, it creates the collection and it adds the value for that to that collection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another button. There's also another function called clear collect. I'm going to demo that right now. Button, and I'm going to add the function called clear collect. Clear collect, test collect one, and the value that I'm going to put is for call one is 1 comma call 2 would be test. Okay, and if I close this bracket and rename this text, I'm going to rename this text as Okay. If I click play, it removes all the rows except the one that is declared as part of the clear collect function. And you might be asking, what if I want to remove all the rows? Then I can use another function called clear. I'm going to drag and drop here. And there's also another function called clear. And the source to clear is test collect one. So what this will do, rename this as clear. I click play and I click this button. All the data for this particular collection will be deleted if I use the clear function. If I click clear collect, it will remove all rows, but the one row that is specified in the clear collect, that will be added. If I click collect, it will just keep on appending the data. If that particular collection doesn't exist, that new collection will be created, and if it already exists, it will just keep on appending the values. You can just press it as many times as you want, and it will just do that. If I press clear collect, it will just add one, and clear will just remove all rows. That's the summary. I want to quickly go over the navigate function. So what I've done is I've created another app. I'm just going to click. I'm going to add another screen to this app. You can go to tree view and you can add two screens. Okay. And in the first screen, I'm going to add a button, drag and drop a button. And in the button, there's this function called navigate. Navigate lets you select which page you want to move to, right? So if I go to tree view, I want to go from screen one to screen two. So when I select screen two, okay, and if I just close this, okay, and if I play this app, so I'm in screen one right now. If I click this button, it takes me to screen two. Okay, just to know that we are which screen we are in, I'm just going to add labels as well. This one I'm going to call as screen two, and going back to my first screen, I'm going to add a label called screen one, text label screen one. Okay, so playing this application again, if I click this button, it takes me to screen two. But there's another functionality of the navigate function also. If you type the navigate function and you select, you can also select the type of transition you want. You can like how you want it to fade, like you want it to fade or none or uncovered. Okay, you can just play around with it. Let's just try uncover right now. And next is there's another variable called context. I'm just going to play this without the context right now. If I click this, as you see, it just swipes from right to left. Okay, so there are multiple transitions that's available. You can just play around with it as required, and you can add context also, just like how you add a context variable in, let's say you're going to add a context variable to screen one using the update context function. Like in, like you can add a button, and you are able to use the update context button to add a context variable, update context, and you can just put in square brackets all the variables that you want for one, and I'm just going to set it as test. Okay, so what this button will do, I'm just going to rename this button so we do not get confused. Okay, so this is going to navigate to page 2, and this button is just creating a context variable. You can go to variables tab here, and you can go to context variable, and you see in screen 1 we have a variable called var1. We can add a similar variable for screen 2 as well. Like from screen 1 itself, using the navigate button, we have a way to add context. So using the navigate function, the third parameter that we can add is, what is this? Copilot. Okay. Third parameter that we can add is uh, the context variable for the next page. Okay, and just instead of calling it as var1, I'm just going to put var1 page 2. Okay, so this context variable is a context variable for screen 2 and not screen 1. You shouldn't get confused, right? So when you use a navigate, we are adding the context to the destination page, not the page that we are in right now. So if I click this button, and if I click this button, it has added a, let's go and come back. It has added a context variable to screen 2. You won't be able to, yeah, you are able to see it right now. And in fact, just to prove a point, let me add a text as well. Add a, what should I call it? It's var1 page 1. Var1 page 2. Yeah, var1 page 2. Page 2. Okay, so it's just going to display the value again. Let me go back to screen 1 again. Let me press play. If I click this button, it has added a context variable called var1 page 2 with a value test. If you want to, so the point I'm trying to make is navigate function can also be used to update the context variable of the page that it's getting navigated to, and not the page where you're navigating from. This is the thing that you will have to not get confused about when you're using the navigate function to update a context variable.
So I just want to quickly go over variables, the theory behind it. All variables are created implicitly when they appear in a set, update context, navigate, collect, or clear collect function. So what this is saying is there is no need to declare that a variable is created. If you just use the variable in a set or update context function, well, I'm just repeating myself, like PowerUps automatically sets aside memory locations to store values for those variables. Even if the set function or update context or navigate collect or clear collect function is not run, it will automatically set aside memory locations for storing the values from these functions. To declare a variable and its type, you only need to include it in any of the functions anywhere in your app. It's just repeating what I just said. None of these functions create variables; they only fill variables with values. Okay? So it's just repeating what I said. The set, update, navigate, collect, they do not create the variables; they only fill the variables with values. You never declare variables explicitly as you might in other programming tools. So if you are familiar with programming languages like C Sharp or C or any of these tools, you will have to give a command like declare or set or something which declares the variable and its type, and then you would store the values for those variables. You don't have to do that in Power Apps. And all typing is implied from the usage. It's just saying like the type of variable is implied from the way it is used. For example, if you set x as 1, it would assume the x is a integer, and if you set x as hello, it would assume that x is a text. So if I read this, for example, you might have a button control with an onSelect formula equal to set x equal to 1. If you added another button and set its onSelect property to set x hello, an error would occur because the type of text string doesn't match the type in the previous set, which is a number. So all this is saying is the first time the variable is triggered using the set command, it will look at the type. Like if it is the first time it is triggered, if it is of type 1, it would assume that variable is of a type number. If you like set the value of a variable as a type text when you first declare it, it will assume that variable is text. You won't be able to change from one type to another. Like if you just by setting the variable into another data format. You remove a variable by removing all the set, update, context, navigate, collect, and clear collect functions that implicitly establish a variable. Without these functions, the variable doesn't exist. So what this is saying is basically, if you remove all of these functions from your Power App, that variable will just stop existing completely. That is what it's saying here. All variables are held in memory while the app runs. After the app closes, the values that the variables hold are lost. This is a very important thing. Uh, if you close the application, the values in the variable will get deleted. If you need to access that variable somewhere else, you might have to patch it to a data source. Like I've been to data sources already. For example, you might want to patch it to a database table or Excel table or any data sources that is available to Power Apps. Okay, so what the next line is saying, you can store the contents of a variable in a data source by using the patch or collect function. So patch and collect function not only works for collections. Okay, so that the collect function, I'm saying the collect function not only works for collection, it also works for other data data types that are tables. So I'm saying other connectors that are of type table. You'll be able to use collect function. There's another function called patch. I'll go through this later. That can also be used to add data to a table connector. You can also store values in collections on the local device by using the save function. So this only works for using the Power Apps mobile application. So what this is saying is there is a function called save data, and that function can be used to store the values of a variable in your phone's memory. So next time you open that application, you will still be able to access this data. Like that variables data would still be there when you open the application again if it is saved using the save data function.
So now I want to talk about understanding tables and records. Okay, understand table and records. In Power Apps, you can create a Canvas app that accesses information in Microsoft Excel, SharePoint, SQL Server, and several other sources that store data in records and tables. I've already explained this in my previous video. You can review it if you want again. Uh, to work most effectively with this kind of data, review the concept that underline these structures. So, to understand tables and records, we have to understand the concepts behind this. I'm going to go through it right now. A record contains one or more category of information about a person, a place, or a thing. For example, a record might contain the name, the email address, and the phone number of a single customer. Other tools refer to a record as a row or item. So this is a good example of the table that could be imported into Power Apps. See, this is a record. Record is basically like a row, okay, and it contains information about a single item. Like, for example, in this table, you have this thing called bread, and you have information about price, quantity, and quantity on hand and quantity of order for each of the items here. Okay. And a table holds one or more records that contain the same category of information. So this particular table contains information about some food that somebody is selling, like chocolate, bread, water, or something. So another the example that they have given here is, for example, a table might contain the name, the email address, and the phone number of 50 customers. In your app, you will use formulas to create, update, and manipulate records and tables. You'll probably read and write data to an external data source, which is an external table. I'm going to go through it in the tutorial that I'm going to show right now. A field is an individual piece of information in a record. You can visualize this sort of information as a value in a column for a particular record. In this table, a field is this particular price of this particular row. So 4.95 is the price of bread, and that is a field. And a column is the entire column for price. You have to distinguish this, right? So a field denotes a particular item in a record. A column is all the rows for that uh, particular field for all the rows. That is a column. So I've been through this already. A column refers to the same field for one or more records in a table. In the example above, each product has a price field, and that price is the same column for all product. So yeah, this is just repeating what I just explained. There are many functions that can be used to update records in a Power App. The first and probably the most important one is patch. And there are many of them like collect, update, remove, and everything. And I'm going to go through each one of them one by one. Going to do right now, going to our Power App, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to insert the database table that we created, I think, 2 lessons ago. I can go to current environment tables, and I'm just going to select Dataverse table. So what this table, it just has 2 columns. It just has let me show that in a table. I'm going to drag and drop data table, and the table that we want to add is Dataverse table. So I'm going to select Dataverse table, and if see, there's heading one and heading two, and there are other default columns that Dataverse is already added. I'm just going to remove the other columns quickly. Remove. So you see, we have a table with 2 headings, and to do is I'm just going to remove all this data. So what I have to do is I'm just going to add a button. I didn't want to go to remove if function, but I'm just going to use the remove if function to remove all the rows. Remove if. So what remove if is function is, you are allowed to select the data source or a collection, and you have to put the conditions to delete that particular row. And if you put true, then all the rows will get deleted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select data was table 1. I'm just going to put true. Okay, and what this one will do is this will clear all the rows. So you have to be a bit careful while you're writing a formula like this. You might have a table with millions of records which is relevant to your business, and if you use this function remove, this will delete all the rows. You have to be a bit careful. So if you do this, this might take a while, but all the rows will get deleted. Yeah, so there is no data right now. Okay, I'm just going to select this button, and I'm just going to rename it to remove all. Okay, just going to put this to the top right. Okay, and the next function that I'm going to talk about is patch. This is probably the most important function that most people will ever use. Okay, I'm creating another button, calling this as patch. And what I'm going to do is in the on select property, I'm going to select patch, and the record is data table, and the value to update is, you will have to select, you have to put a flower bracket, and then you could start typing the column name. I'm just going to put heading 1. I'm just going to put uh, value should be 1, and heading 2 should be, let's put test. And if I close the bracket, this should work. So if I press control, so you don't have to play the app all the time. You can just press control, and you should be able to click it, or you can actually click it. And what this one will do is just add a row to, yeah, sorry, instead of click, it should be the alt key. So you can use the alt key, and you can press the button, and another, you don't have to click play every time. uh, So if I press this multiple times, the same thing will get repeated over and over again. And if I want to be a bit more creative, like for example, I want to put the time, I can use the function now, and I want to format it in a specific way. Format. So you should use the text function. Text function now, and let's select short date time. Okay, and if I press this right now, the short date time of the time that I click this button, it will get added. Okay, and I can click remove all again, and I can run this a bunch of times. Okay. And the next thing I want to do right now is I want to go over collect function. Collect function, you might remember this when we were talking about collections. Remember when we talked about the variable type collection, which can be used to store a table. That can also be used here. It does pretty much the same thing as patch when it is applied to a table. There's pretty much no difference. Okay. But I'm just going to show it to you anyway. I'm just going to copy paste this. Okay, copy paste, and change the name to collect, collect, and instead of patch function, I'm just going to put collect, and the parameters are also pretty much similar. You have to open bracket and select the item, and the item would be heading 1, 1, and heading 2, and to let's be a bit more creative, I'm just going to put created with collect. Okay, created with collect. So uh, so you see, if I just put 1, the problem with collect, unlike patch, when we just put 1 for heading 1, it doesn't automatically convert it into text because the type for heading 1 is apparently text. If I go to fields, fields is of type, heading 1 is of type text, and when you put a number it automatically converts it if you're using the patch function. But collect is a bit more strict when it comes to type, so you will have to change this into a text, then it should work as is. So there's pretty much no difference except the small differences being that you have it doesn't automatically change the type when you are using collect. So if I use this function, it yeah, so it just created another row with the collect function. Just going to rename this. Okay, if I click this button again by pressing the alt button and clicking the button, it's able to work as is. I've been to patch and collect. The next function I want to go through is update function. So update function is a bit more complicated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new screen. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a button. Okay, and I'm going to in this button on select, I'm going to create a collection using the clear collect function. Clear collect, and I'm going to call this collection test collect 1. I'm just going to add some values. Heading 1. I'm just going to repeat this twice, just that the heading 1 column will be changed. Okay, instead of heading 1, I'm just going to call the second row as 2 and third row as 3. Okay, if somebody runs this clicks on this button, they would be able to go to the collections, and you will be able to see that a collection called uh, test collect 1 is created. I can view this table and I'm able to see the two columns with 3 rows, heading 1 and heading 2. And I'm just going to create a grid to display this collection. Table, and I select that, and I go to fields and I select fields. So you see I have added these 2 headings as well. Let me rename this button collection. So I'm going to add another button here which would update the third row. So if we have 1, 2, 3, let's update the third row such that instead of saying test, let's name it to something else. I mean, just make it display something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the update function. Collection is asking for the collection. The collection I have to select is test collect 1. First we will have to display only one record for the old parameter. So the first parameter is the collection, second parameter is old only takes one row, indicating the rows to replace. So okay, you can have multiple rows as well, but I'm just going to use only one row this time. So I'm going to use filter, and the source should be test collect 1, and heading 1, let's see, make it equal to 3. So heading equal to 3. Any row where heading equal to 3, we want to update it to something else. So the new value should be, and we'll have to we just want to select only one. So let use the first, and if you close this, and we want to update it to something else. So I'm going to open bracket heading one. Let's just keep it as three, and heading two. Let's just call it. This is the row. Okay. Let me close the far bracket. Let me close the round brackets. And if I press enter, sorry, if I click out of it, I'm going to rename it to update row. Okay, make it a bit bigger. So this one creates a collection. This one updates the third row to something else. So if I press alt and I press this button, you see the third row is updated. So the update function is able to update a table, or it's able to update a collection, where you will have to define the old record using functions like first and filter. The filter does like it gets the rows where the heading is three, and first one just selects the first, because when you use a filter function, the output is actually a table. But what they want here is they want a record. As I said, is like the row of the of the table. So to get the first record of the output of the filter function, will have to use the first function, and we want to replace the returned value to something else. So that is what we have done here. So we have created another record where heading is 3 and heading 2 is this is the third row. Okay, and that's the update function for you. We could create the update function for a dataverse table also, but if you go to the dataverse table, let me go to the first screen, and if I go to fields, and let's just go to attribute, there's so many fields here, right? So we'll have to declare every one of these rows if you are using the update function. So that is why for the purpose of this demo, and to make it a bit faster, I had demoed the update function in a collection for you. So the function now I'm going to go through is remove function. Remove function is similar to update. It's just that instead of updating a value, it just removes that particular row. Go into Power Apps. I'm just going to copy paste this button. Okay, and instead of update, I'm going to put remove. So you have to declare the collection, and it you have to declare the item. And since there is no replace parameter, I'm just going to remove it. So there are two parameters for the remove function. First you have to declare the collection, and next you will have to declare the record that you want to remove. That is the you can declare multiple remove also. You could sorry, you could remove multiple records also. You just put a comma, and you can add um, another item also if you want. Okay, and what I'm going to do right now is when I click play, and if I click this button, that row got deleted. Let me recreate the collection by clicking the create collection button. Okay, so I'm going to rename this button also. It shouldn't be updated. It's delete third row. Playing this button, click this button, you see third row is gone. So that is delete function. I will go over remove if function. We have already gone through remove if. I'm just going to go through it again in a bit more detail. Okay, so we already used this remove if, but the second parameter was true. But what if I just want to remove all the rows for test? Sorry, heading to column is test, right? So I'm just going to copy paste this button, copy and paste this button, and move it here. And see, remove if has two parameters. First you have to declare uh, the table, and the second value you want to do is the declare is the condition to remove those rows. So heading 2, if it is test, it should be removed. So I have put the first condition equal to test. Every row which is equal to test would be removed if somebody clicks on this button. You click remove all. This might take a while. So all the rows were equal, which has test 2 for heading 2 is deleted. That is remove all. Rename this to remove all test. I'm going to go over sort and sort by column function right now. Go into Power App. I recreated this table. Go into click insert data table, and I'm going to move it to the bottom. And for the data source, I'm going to select dataverse table, and for a fields, I'm going to select want all 9 fields. I'm just going to select only heading 1 and heading 2. But the problem is, you see in the I have created a patch function which you can like just modify it to add another number like 15. And when I click this button, it just adds another row here. Okay, but the thing is, it is not sorted as we want. So to sort this, we can go back to data source, and there's this function called sort. Okay, sort, and you have to write a formula which is used to sort the function. For now, I'm just going to leave it as heading 1. And I close bracket. e- Everything will get sorted by heading 1. So but the thing is, the reason why we are having 1 5 instead of just 15th, instead of considering it as a 15th number, it assumes that this is a text. So if I could just call it as value. So now it converts the text into a value before it is sorting it. The There is an error in this formula because there's this thing called delegation, which means I'll get through delegations right now. But bear in mind, we should watch out for delegation errors. But there's also another function called sort by column, where you just declare the column that you want to sort it by. The source is going to be data was table column heading 1. So this does the same as sort. It's just that you have to give the name of the column that you want to sort it by. The reason why it's not just showing heading 1 is because CRDCA underscore heading is how it is actually stored in Dataverse. The the heading 1 is just the way that is, it's like an alias that makes it easier for people to see. But just remember, like the column name in Dataverse is different to what you're seeing here, and for sort by column, you have to give the real column name, and that's what we have done here. So I've been through sort and sort by column. I will go over for all later. I will go to first n and last n right now, and I'll go through filter. We have already gone through it, like when we were demoing collect and update remove and all. I've gone through first, but I've not gone through first n and last n. Filter also we have gone through when we were talking about update and remove, but I will go through first n, last n, and filter right now. Go into Power Apps. So you see that we have a sort function in the items parameter. Instead, imagine if I just want to display the first 3 items only, then I can just modify it. So with first n, and count is just going to be, let's just put it as 3 for now. Yeah, too many, two brackets. Yeah, so what this should show is just the first 3 items of the table. Last 3 would just be the opposite. Last sorry, last n is just the opposite of first n. Instead of getting the first three items of a table, it just gets the last three items of a table. So now to talk about the filter function. The filter function, just based on a parameter, it does the filtering for us. So if I put filter, oh no, should be typing it here. Filter filter data table, and the let's assume we just want the rows which doesn't have test. So you can go to heading 2 not equal to test. So what this one does is it filters heading 2 wherever it is not test. So that is first and last and filter for you. I will go through other functions like errors, validate first, search for all, and concurrent later. But bear in mind, with regard to table, these are the most important function: patch, collect, update, remove if, sort by column, first and last and filter. There are lots of functions in Power Apps. You can go to powerapps.com and just Google or search in Bing Power Apps functions, and you'll be able to see this thing called formula references, and that will give you the like explanation for each and every formula that we have. For example, if I just go to day, it is a function that uh, takes into parameter the date time, a value in date time format, and gets the day, month, year for you. So this is the day function. There's month function, year function. So many functions are there. If you don't know what function that you want to use, a good starting point would be to ask Copilot. So, for example, I like instead of typing this formula manually, and I imagine I just want to have heading 1 as 15 and heading 2 as test. I can just ask Copilot, create a formula, create the okay, add row to where ding fun is 17 and ding 2 is test 2. If I press this button, it should generate a function for us. So it's using the collect function instead of the patch function, but it's okay. You can click apply and that creates the function for you. Like, okay, it just inserted it in the middle of a function. But if I just remove the other things, this would be a Copilot generated formula. Yeah. So bear in mind, like you can ask Copilot for a function that you don't know which function, if you don't know what function to use, or you could read the Power Apps documentation to get the function that you want. So I want to go over table formulas right now. In Excel and Power App, you use formulas to manipulate numbers and strings of a text in similar ways. Similarly, you can use formulas to access and manipulate data in tables and records. You can use names of tables as arguments in some formulas, such as min, to show the lowest value in the price column of a catalog table. So there's this function called min, which takes in the table name and it takes the column name, and with that, it finds the minimum value in that particular column. Other formulas provide whole tables as result values, such as there's this function called rename column, which takes in parameters like the table name, the old column name, and the new column name that you want to return as. So rename column will which returns all the records from the catalog table but renames the name of the price column to cost. So the way table formulas are different is it either like aggregates the value. For example, it in main basically aggregates the value in one column into one number. There's also a max function which does exactly opposite of max, so opposite of min, I was meant to say. And rename column, as the name suggests, it just renames one of the columns to a different name. So rename column gives out an entire table as the output. So I'm quickly going to show you an example of min and rename columns that displays all the formulas that I just showed just now. Firstly, I have created a collection called test collect 2, where you're just creating two columns. First column is number call 1 and the second column is text call 2. A number call 1 is a number, so it's just 1, 2, and 3. And there's text call 2, which is a text. So the um, that can be, I just inputted that collection into a data table, and the first column is text and the second column is number, so you're able to see this collection as a table. And I just created a simple label where the first part of the text is just saying min of number of call, and the minimum value for number call 1 is extracted using this function min. The first parameter is the collection or table that you want to get the minimum of, and the second parameter is the column name. And I did the same for max. Max just instead of min, they're just using max, and also another function is average. That's why you're able to see the minimum number is 1, maximum number is 3, average number is 1 plus 2 plus 3, which is 6. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So, and the last function that I want to go over is rename column. So the rename column is, instead of creating a collection, I'm just going to directly input it to a data table. I'm going to demonstrate rename column. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this data table and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to lower it down a bit. So instead of text call, I'm going to rename this text call into something else. So I could create another collection which stores the renamed column as a new collection, or I could just directly go to the items property of this data table and modify it. So I can go to the items property and I'm going to rename columns, and old column name would be, you want to change the text column to into something else. I'm just going to call it new text call. I'm just going to call it new text column. When I close the bracket, it's going to give me an error because this text column doesn't exist. So what I can do is I can go to the properties fields. I can go to the data table properties and I can go to fields. I can remove this text column field and I can go to add fields and add this new text column. Now we have just renamed the text call to into new text column. So that is, so this function rename column is taking the old column name which is text call 2 and replacing the column into something new. Okay. These are a set of table functions that are which can output a table as the output. There are many of them. Like if you go to rename call, just search rename column in the uh, Power Platform documentation. There are many functions like add column, drop column, show columns, rename columns, drop column. So there are many functions which manipulate the input table and gives out a table. So for example, show columns, it just takes the entire table and just shows only one column. You might want to use that somewhere. And there is drop columns which takes in a table and it just removes a table called unit price. You could go through it if you're more interested in functions which gives out a table.
Features.
I'm going to go over delegation right now. Power Apps works best with a backend data source when a Power FX query. So Power FX query is the query that query or functions that you call in Power Apps. Power FX query fully translates into an equivalent query that runs on the data source. Power Apps sends a query, the data source understands, the data source runs the query, and Power Apps gets the results. So what this is saying is every time you type a Power FX query, it translates the Power FX formulas into the query that the backend data source accepts, and Power Apps then gets the output of the data source, and it's used for whatever Power Apps needs to do with that data. But PowerFX query can't always translate into equivalent query on every data source. So what this is saying is you won't be able to do every single PowerFX query into equivalent queries in the data source. For example, Dataverse supports more query features than Excel. Dataverse supports the in membership query operator, but Excel doesn't. A query is non-delegatable if it uses features the data source doesn't support. If any part of a query expression is non-delegatable, Power Apps doesn't delegate any part of that query. So what Power Apps does, if it is unable to delegate any part of the Power FX query, it gets all the data in the application's memory, and it does the data manipulation in the application itself.
Features. Sometimes you won't be able to delegate the query. So what Power Apps has to do, it has to get the entire data set as much as possible, and then it has to do the sorting in the Power Apps side. When a query is non-delegatable, so now non-delegatable is if any query cannot be delegated to the backend data source, it is non-delegatable. Power Apps gets the first 500 records from the data actions in the query. You can increase this limit to 2000 records. Changing the limit, Power Apps limits the result size to keep your app performance well. Larger result set can cause performance issue for your app and Power App. So what this is saying is if it is non-delegatable, it gets the first 500 records and then does the whatever data analysis that has to be done for that Power FX query, it does it from the Power App side. But the problem is it can cause performance issues. Like the initially it's 500 record that it's able to do, but you can increase it to 2000 records. But if you increase it from 500 records to 2000 records, you will get a performance issue. So as much as possible, try to do as much Power FX queries that is delegatable. If any query, for example, in query in Excel. For example, if in query is not able to be done in Excel data source, try to get all the data and then store it uh, as a collection or something, or a collection or a variable, and then do all the sorting or whatever thing that you need to do. That would increase your performance a bit. Delegation works with certain tabular data sources only. If a data source supports delegation, its connected document explains the support. Check the delegation warnings in your formula. So when you type a formula, like for example, if you have Excel data source and you use the in parameter, you will receive an error. You will receive a yellow triangle which says that this is not delegatable, and you'll be able to you'll have to work your way around the delegation problem to improve performance. Or if you're okay with just limiting the data size to 500, you could just let the delegate non-delegatable tasks be done from the Power Apps end. And you'll have to live with the performance issue. There are filter functions like filter, search, first, lookup. These can be delegated in pretty much all the data sources. Filter functions can be delegated. Sorting functions also like sort and sort by columns can be delegated in most data sources. Aggregate functions. Some aggregate functions can be delegated based on the backend support. Functions like sum, average, min, and max can be delegated. Uh, so these aggregate functions like sum, average, min, and max can be delegated in most data sources. So some functions are non-delegatable. For example, first n, last n are not delegatable. There are other functions like choices, concat, collect, clear, collect, group by, ungroup. These cannot be delegated. All the data is managed from the the Power App side only. So already been to a default number of records is 500, and you can increase it to 2000. And this is the warning that you will get, delegation warning. This spot filter of this formula might not work correctly on large data sets. The data sources might not be able to process this formula and might return incomplete data set. So you will get this delegation warning if any of the formulas that you use cannot be delegated to the backend.
That's all, folks. See you in the next video on Power App Studio. In the next session, I will go through all the features in the Power App Studio and what each object in the Power App Studio will do, and what are the objects that is available in Power Apps. I will go through that in the next video. Thanks, everyone. Bye.